Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to An Afternoon With. I'm Dr. Michael Savoy. I run the Center for Information Technology and Management here at the University of Texas at Dallas. We're very excited to have you with us today. The seminar, for those of you who've been here before, you know the format. For those of you who haven't, the way An Afternoon With works is we have a guest speaker. They come in. We spend, he and I will spend about an hour up here just talking about various issues related to the topic of the day. Today's topic is cybersecurity, so we'll be talking about security, cybersecurity, vulnerability management, a number of other issues that fall within the cybersecurity space. So we'll be talking about those today. We'll spend about an hour or so talking, and then we'll open the floor for questions. We'll do 30 to 45 minutes of question and answer, so you have an opportunity to interact with our guest and myself. And hopefully you'll leave here with some knowledge maybe you didn't know before, maybe some insights you didn't have before, and hopefully at least a good understanding of where cybersecurity is today and maybe where it's going to go tomorrow. And we're a university, so obviously part of that's going to be looking at what does it mean for our students, what does it mean for people who are looking for careers in cybersecurity, what opportunities are available to you. So with that, what I want to do is if you will join me in welcoming our guest today, Mr. Brian Wrozek from TI. All right, Brian, we'll start with, and I'm not much for introductions, which you know, so we will start by asking you to kind of fill everybody in on who you are, what you're doing at TI, what's your role in terms of cybersecurity.
Sure. So I'm the security guy at TI. I've been at TI 21 years, and I started off as a programmer, and kind of moved around database administration, Unix administration, and then rotated into security. I've been in this position on my 12th year now in IT security. So I do all the usual security stuff, policies, awareness, vulnerability scanning. I also do disaster recovery. And just recently, I picked up the role of privacy director. So that's been a real interesting and learning opportunity for me there just at the beginning of this year. Working for TI is great. It's a global company, so I get to deal with issues across the entire globe. We're a chip design and manufacturing company, so we have issues around design, which is very much cutting edge, get product out to market. And then you have manufacturing, which is once we're making chips, don't even breathe by the equipment. We just want it to run nonstop 7x24. So a real both ends of the extreme kind of environment when it comes to availability and risk-taking. So you have to be very flexible in that kind of environment. Good. But great company to work for.
Let's talk a little bit about TI and what are, in general, security issues that are keeping you up at night, kind of things that TI is having to deal with these days, and how that's changed over the last 21 years. Sure.
So our focus is around analog technology, analog chips, and so I worry a lot about people trying to steal our intellectual property. What's nice about that, it's not like a credit card number that you can turn around immediately and sell, or something that's really quick and liquid. It takes a while to steal an entire chip design, and then if you steal it, you got to find somewhere to make it, and then if you make it, who are you going to sell it to, and are they going to trust that chip over something from a respected company like TI? But you still worry about somebody stealing it. But then on the manufacturing side, I'm more worried about availability. Is somebody going to try to disrupt our manufacturing so that somebody will buy their chip instead of ours because our factories are down from some kind of denial of service attack? And now just recently, I've been worried about privacy. I'm shocked at the variety and confusion of regulations around the globe around privacy and protecting personal information. And so just trying to get my hands around what we need to do there has been interesting.
And we were talking earlier about the issue. TI obviously is a global company. And we were talking earlier about the issue of it's not even today that clients will come in and go, we want TI instead of ABC company over here. But within TI, they'll say, we want a chip from this plant in this location versus this plant in this location. Talk a little bit about what that means for TI. How does that affect production and various ways of providing your products and services to clients?
Sure. So it certainly complicates the supply chain and the factory lot starts and everything. People will come in and qualify a factory for a particular product, whether it be automotive or medical. And so there's, there's corporate like quality requirements, there's government regulations, and so once they have it qualified, that's the only place that they want that particular chip to be made. Even though technically we could make it somewhere else, they only want it from that one. So that puts a lot of pressure on us from an inventory standpoint, disaster recovery. So if we think back to when we had the earthquake in Japan, a lot of customers then were scrambling saying, well, what about, can you ensure our supply? Well, remember, in the contract, you said you only wanted it from this factory. Well, now they're saying, okay, well, maybe 2 factories wouldn't be so bad. So we're having to, do more qualifications.
Right.
As well as what we've started doing is getting a little bit smarter about, if I can make this product in 3 or 4, being a little more selective where we make it, so those that are dedicated to a single factory, can get that time on those machines and those testers. But again, all that complicates the the order start and the inventory management and everything. So that complication makes it difficult from a security standpoint and disaster recovery standpoint.
What about your supply chain? What's coming into your various factories around the world? How does TI, and obviously I don't want you to give away any secrets here, but how does TI then turn around and qualify your suppliers? How do you ensure that there's not, and we'll talk a little bit in a little while about embedded technologies, but talk a little bit about how you ensure the security of your supply chain.
So we look at making sure that we don't have a single point of failure from a supply standpoint. I get involved in a number of third-party assessments in assessing the security of that partner and that supplier to make sure that they can deliver to us. Reviewing their disaster recovery plans and things of that nature. We use that technique to help. And it's not a one-time assessment. We go back and do it. I think that's one of the challenges with security is once you start doing something, you kind of committed to that forever. Right. So you think, oh, one assessment, not a problem. Well, no, you're going to go back next year and the year after. And then as you grow your supplier base, the number of those assessments grow. Yeah. So that's kind of how we do it.
And we talked a little bit about the issue of cybersecurity versus vulnerability, right? And the issue of, traditionally, you and I have been in this for a very long time. And cybersecurity has always been really focused on, I've got data sitting on a server, how do I make sure my data is secure? Right. But in the environment we operate in today, there's so many points where data can be intercepted. There's so many points where issues can be put together. So let's talk a little bit about the embedded technologies issue that we talked about earlier. When we talk about embedded technology, first off, would you explain to everyone when we talk about embedded technology what we're talking about? And then, why is that such a concern, not only for TI, but should be a concern for everybody sitting out here?
Sure. So to make it personal, my oldest daughter has juvenile diabetes. And so in the last few years, she started wearing an insulin pump, which is great. I mean, it really helps control the amount of insulin that she gets. Her health is much better. We've seen a dramatic improvement in her health over that. But then I worry about the fact that some of these models of pumps have wireless technology embedded in them so that you can scan your pump and then post your readings in a PDF file and send it off to the doctor. So again, all great stuff. The doctor can review her numbers and her insulin ratios on a regular basis. So it makes it much more convenient, much quicker turnaround. But what if somebody hacks into that pump and instead of her getting 1 unit of insulin, she gets 21 units? Well, that sends her into a coma. And the developers of that technology, they're thinking about all the great things that they can do, all the features they can put into it. But they weren't thinking somebody would hack in and deliver a lethal dose of insulin. And when you ask them that, they're going like we said, who'd want to do that? Right? This is to save life. Nobody would want to do that. There are people out there that would want to do that.
I think it's interesting because I was giving a talk up in Washington on this exact issue, and we were talking about pacemakers, and they had just
same problem,
same problem with pacemakers, and one of the security companies that just released a press release saying that they had been able to hack a pacemaker, and the question was asked of me, well, why would anybody want to hack a pacemaker? And I said, well, let me use 2 words to describe this for you. I said, Dick Cheney. All right? And everybody in the audience just kind of looked at me, and one of the ladies went, I'd do that. So, that's the thing. I mean, we say it's not, but I could explain to the guy. I said, understand, this is the purest of crimes. Because if I hack a pacemaker, I can do it from a long way away.
Yep.
It will not look like there was a hack. It will look like the person with the pacemaker just had a heart attack, which he or she would be predisposed to anyway, but that's why they have the pacemaker to begin with. So it does become a very serious issue and one that's very personal.
Yeah, and then, so whose job is it? Is it TI as the maker of the chip that's in that device? Is it the device manufacturer? Is it the person who came up with the wireless protocol? I mean, there's so many different components. And, the chip in and of itself is fine, but how it was used or configured could play into that. And then a lot of these, certainly medical devices, go through years of FDA testing and approval. So the device, when it's ready for public, it could actually be 2 years behind the technology. But yet you can't patch it because that particular model and that particular version was what was approved. If you want to try and patch it, well, you got to go through that whole cycle all over again. And so those are some of the challenges you're seeing, and this technology is getting embedded in your braking system. It's embedded, in medical devices. You're starting to hear about it being embedded in, your smart meters and that types of things. So it's being embedded everywhere, and I worry that we're going to make the same vulnerability software mistakes in this technology as we made 10, 20 years ago when PCs were first coming out.
Right.
So, that's a real challenge for us.
Yeah, but like you said, the mistake, if it's made today, is much more severe than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now you're talking about the human being part of the network, not the end user. So the devices, the insulin pump, the pacemaker and whatever, that is a direct effect on the person who's using it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then.
Sure.
Y'all make a few chips here and there, right?
Yeah.
So how do you prevent somebody from going in the code that's embedded in the chip itself and putting malicious code in there? How does that, once again, I'm not asking you to give away trade secrets here, but,
sure.
But this is obviously an issue because if someone were able to put malicious code in the chip, even though it was dormant, then somewhere down the line they could actually activate it.
Right. And what makes this job so interesting is there's no one solution or one technology that we can deploy to protect against that. So there's a lot of things that we do. Physical security plays into it. How well we control access into our fab environment, how well we're monitoring with video cameras, how well we check. A lot of times when we receive software or when we receive components from other companies, there's very specific ways that technology can get into our company. It's usually vetted by somebody. We have network segmentation so that if you get into the company, you still can't get into the network where that factory tool is installed. And then QA. A lot of people don't think of quality assurance as a security functionality, and it's not technically. But that's a key part of our security. We run tests on that software. We run software scanning to see, is it behaving differently? Is it behaving strangely? And can we explain that and look at that? So all of those different things, play into protecting that. And I can't do that all myself. I'm relying on the QA team, the network team, the software development team. But I have my hands in a little bit of everything, which is what makes this job, so much fun.
So,
Sorry.
Sure.
How about do you also rely on the maybe hosting part of the security and the provider?
Absolutely. In fact, we kind of categorize our suppliers into different, ABC or 1, 2, 3, and depending on the criticality and the nature of their work, dictates the level of security that we put. So there are actually some suppliers where we will actually install our own video cameras, our own badge readers, our own network gear in their facility. And so, the only people who can get into that room and work on TI products are people that we've vetted, that we monitor. But it takes a very, very special relationship with that supplier to do that. But yes, we do that in some cases.
let's go the other way then. Let's move the other side. TI's chips are in products that every one of us use. In fact, most of us probably have TI chips on us in the various devices that we have with us right now. So as the world becomes more and more connected, I mean, we talk all the time about, sensors, and we talk about smart refrigerators and everything else, and TI chips are going to be in most of that stuff. How do you then turn around and does TI see any responsibility, and that's probably not the right word, but do you see vulnerabilities that TI needs to manage in terms of where the chips end up? If they end up in a television, or they end up in our TVs are becoming wireless devices, sure, right? So does that then become a vulnerability or a cybersecurity issue for TI?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if that would become a vulnerability for us or not. I know what we are trying to do is build more security into the silicon itself. Mm-hmm. So when you think about encryption and having to get encryption keys shared around, we do have the capability to actually take your encryption key and burn it right into the silicon, burn out fuses and things of that nature, so that you can't steal that key because it's actually part of the hardware now, right? So we're starting to embed more and more security technology like that into our chips so that the cell phone makers and the other people can take advantage of that rather than relying on the software.
So do you see that as a way, because one of the issues that we're dealing with right now, and obviously we're a university, we deal with this, we have students who are building apps. Our students aren't always the most security-minded people in the world, put it nicely. They like to build apps, and they build apps, and they put apps out, and it's so easy today to build an app, put it on the iStore, get it out there, or the App Store at Google, and get them out there and play. And security really is not front and center when they put these things together. But then an app hits somebody, you got 100,000 or 500,000 downloads. This thing is now on all these devices. How do you manage if there's not security in that app? Your chips are on the phone. Is there a way that you can use your chips to manage that vulnerability that's there?
Sometimes if there's software embedded in there, maybe.
Right.
But if not, no. We do work with, who's buying our chips,
right,
vetting that, certainly from a government standpoint as well.
Right.
There's certain countries that you've got to watch out for, and there's additional regulations if it could be military grade, whether it's actually designed for a military product or not is immaterial. It's the fact that it could be used in such a product. So we track that type of activity.
Yeah.
But if some student were to order a sample chip and create some crazy product for it, there's really not much we can do about that.
Mm-hmm. And you talked earlier about wireless solutions and the vulnerabilities that are there because everything's going wireless now. Expand on that a little bit. Where's your concern in terms of, as a security professional, in terms of what's going on with wireless?
So my biggest concern, and we see it today in things like Google Docs and iCloud and Dropbox, technology builds that into the app behind the scenes so the user doesn't even know. Right? It could be automatically set up to sync some folder to Dropbox.com, and you don't even know that. You just downloaded the app because of whatever it could do, manage recipes or something. But these apps aren't very good about letting you know what else is happening behind the scenes.
Right.
Right. And most people aren't savvy enough to to hook up a scanner and look at what ports are open and what traffic is flying and analyze the IP header and all that. So that's what I worry about, because we've actually gone to people and said, hey, you're sending data out to this server in Argentina, and they're like, what? I didn't know. I wasn't doing that. But it's because they've got something on their system or some app that's doing it for them. And so that's what I worry about, is people don't know all the capabilities of these apps that they're downloading.
Yeah. And I want to transition now, because I think that's a good spot to do it, to talk a little bit about privacy. Mm-hmm. Because one of the big concerns, obviously, is that, and I want to transition into it this way. You and I talked a lot about collaboration tools and social media inside of organizations. Talk a little bit about what that's created in terms of security concerns, privacy concerns.
It's so easy to get information out now. I mean, in the past it was very hard. You had to set up some complicated FTP drop session or something, or email, which had very limits on size of attachments. But now there's so many ways that you can share information, upload information, YouTube, you name it. And sometimes I don't know that people necessarily think. Here's a great example. web translations. If you work at a global company and you're having to work with somebody, maybe it's in France or Germany or China, and they send you a document, it's really easy to cut and paste that, stick it on Google Translate or some other translate website, and get the translation. Great productivity, you're trying to do your job. So what happens to that data that you stuck out there on that website? Mm-hmm. What if that was a financial report? What if that was an M&A document? Some people then, when you mention it, they're like, oh, that probably wasn't a good idea, was it? But they just, they're just so in that groove of using all these tools and technologies when they need it immediately that they don't think that, uh-oh, should I have put that out there? So I worry a lot about that. People like to brag about what they do. They go on to LinkedIn and talk about all this cool stuff, but has that product been released yet? Maybe, but should you be posting that kind of information? So it's just so easy to do.